I truthfully was not doing very well. And I think it's hard to admit that sometimes. We don't see each other hardly at all. We don't even cross paths some days, most days, until he has his 4-day weekend, which is every 2 weeks. Whew, man. His plan does include us having our own children. Welcome back to my channel, everybody. I'm Haley, if you're new. Today, I am doing a deep dive on what the heck is actually going on in my life. These last few years have been so inconsistent for me on YouTube, and so much has kind of transpired, and I've held myself back. Things have held me back from coming on here, and I just kind of want to share why and what's going on. A few things. If you follow me on Instagram, I've already talked a lot about kind of the health issues that are going on, and I've talked to so many of you over there who are dealing with similar things, and I think that's really why I am so passionate about continuing to share this journey, because if it can help one person figure out what is going on with them and give them some peace and some answers, then it would be totally worth it for me. I'm swollen today, and these are like not it. I do want to post a little bit of a trigger warning. I am going to be talking about fertility and trying to conceive, and I just want to be sensitive to everybody who stumbles across my video. Also, I'm like testing out a new filming setup so far. I'm not loving it, but I really wanted to incorporate my office because it's so springy. I just don't know how I want to do it. So cute. If you are just kind of curious about what's going on right now and you want to get to the Q&A part and you don't want to know the backstory or the surgery stuff or what has been kind of going on the last few months, you technically could skip ahead, but I think the context does help. The last 7 or 8 years, I've been dealing with pretty much full-on identity crisis. If you go back and look at some of my older Instagram posts or my old videos, my life really revolved around fitness and my appearance and how athletic I could. We're just gonna take these off because I'm too swollen. My life really revolved around my appearance and my athletic performance, my triathlon times, how shredded and low of a body fat percentage I could be. While I was still doing a lot of content around like organization and stuff, I did a lot of health and wellness as well, even though my take on health and wellness at the time was kind of unhealthy. Little did I know I was really hindering myself and kind of leading myself down a path of a lot of metabolic dysfunction and hormone issues. Fast forward to today, the past 7 years, I've worked with multiple coaches and trying to heal my metabolism, because what initially caused all of the weight gain was I worked with a coach who reverse dieted me really fast, and I put on like 30 pounds in a matter of like 2-ish months. And it was like such a low point for me. I was swollen, I had digestive issues, my depression was really high. I couldn't look in the mirror. It was a really hard time for me. And it wasn't just about how I looked, but it was how I felt at the gym and in clothes. Like I was just really uncomfortable. And aside from the actual like fat gain, I was dealing with a lot of like just swelling in general. So it was an uncomfy time. Then I would say the past like 4 or 5 years, I kind of got to a point where it wasn't so much that I was happy with where I was, but I was definitely better. My body comp had changed a little bit. I was okay. Like I just kind of felt like I'd come into this newer body and I was okay. Still had physical goals, but I was okay. I started having a lot of gut issues, and we were prepping for my wedding. I started having this crazy distension where I literally looked like 8 months pregnant, had this crazy lower left pain that would come up, and I would go through these phases where I'd be like really loving my workouts, and then all of a sudden training would make me so puffy and inflamed, and I like looked like a totally different person, felt awful. It really affected my mental health and just all of the things. I never really felt like I got myself to a good point with all of I started to uncover things like insulin resistance, found out I had PCOS, had an overactive immune system, tried doing all of the things for that as well, and I just felt like I couldn't get to a good spot. Last year, I would say probably about this time, honestly, we started trying to conceive. And I thought it was going to be a longer process, thought there might be some issues just because of my hormonal health issues and the PCOS and all of that. I think Kyle was a little bit more like, oh, we'll be fine kind of a thing. And I think a lot of guys kind of have that tendency because they just don't think about it until they're like in it, and then they're like, everything's gonna be fine. So this past fall, I was talking to one of my friends about us trying to conceive, and she mentioned a fertility specialist that she saw after her second child, and she was like, they were so wonderful, that everybody there was so helpful, the doctors, like, you should call them today. And I'm really happy that she was so persistent about it with me, because I probably would have put it off. And going into this, I literally thought that maybe I would have a similar procedure to her. It was like, you know, scraping of the ovaries to try to get rid of scar tissue, do an ovulation medication, and take progesterone suppositories and call it a day, and we'd be fine. I did not realize at the time it was going to really dramatically change the trajectory of my year and our lives, hopefully for the better, but it has been a really intense couple of months. I am working with Rad Fertility. They're based out of Delaware, and they've been wonderful. Like, truly, the doctors are incredible. The nurses are wonderful. Like, everyone is so helpful. It's a very positive experience for something that can be really emotional. So I set up my consult literally like that week, and this is back in October, early November. I go through, I'm explaining all of these things to my doctor. I'm really grateful that my doctor kind of takes things on the more holistic route when possible, because that's something I've struggled with doctors in the past. And at the end of my consult, she goes, I'm 99% positive that you have endometriosis, because I was explaining to her how I'm just in pain all the time, and it's become this thing where, like, every time we go somewhere, I feel like I'm having a deal, and on top of all the other stuff that I was dealing with, like the gut health and the weight loss resistance, the insulin resistance, like just all of these different things. And so she said, I think you have endometriosis. We're going to bring you in for blood work. We're going to do a ultrasound. And then I think your best bet would be to have surgery, a laparoscopic surgery, to figure out if you have it, and we can diagnose you. I left that call just kind of like, oh my gosh, this was totally not what I was expecting. So we scheduled my surgery. It was early November. We scheduled my surgery we were trying for end of January. It ended up needing to happen end of February. I was told I had to go on contraceptives. Now, this is a personal decision that I have made in my life to not use hormonal birth control, and I've really fought against it, and I like multiple back and forths with my doctor about it. And I just couldn't grasp the concept of needing it, along with a medication called Orilissa. So they wanted me on Agestin, which is the progestin-based hormonal birth control, and Orilissa, which is like basically an endometriosis pain medicine that also stops ovulation. Because when you have a menstrual cycle and you are ovulating, it is priming your body to grow endometriosis, because it's a hormone-based disease. I really fought her on it. She eventually explained to me that taking the suppression medicine will help lower whatever inflammation I have going on right now, so that when they go in there, they can see better and make sure to not miss anything and remove it, and then to also help prevent it from growing back after the surgery. She also was saying a lot of endometriosis specialists will have you do this to help ensure you won't need a second surgery. There are so many women who have to do multiple surgeries, who work with an OB or a doctor who isn't a specialist in endometriosis, and they do ablation versus excision. And there's so many horror stories out there, and I'm fortunate that I know I'm working with someone who was like a master at their field. So I had to trust her, and I was like, okay, fine. So I started that medicine middle of December. So what kind of side effects did I have on this medicine? So initially I felt like I was gaining weight, a lot of water weight. It did kind of subside, but I always kind of felt just a little bit more watery, and definitely more emotional. And my irritability and kind of snappiness, I think, was really evident. We took our annual trip to Maine in February, and I just knew I was not myself. I was so short-fused and so sensitive, and it just wasn't a super great experience. However, out of some of the horror stories I have heard about this medication, I feel like I didn't have too hard of a time on it, aside from like the emotionalness of it. I didn't have like hot flashes much, or like sleep issues or anything like that. Hi, Editing Haley here. I am watching this clip back, and it's been a little bit of time since I filmed this, and I've gone off of those medications, and honestly, like, looking back, these meds were really difficult for me, like from like a mental health standpoint. Some of the things that I have said, some of the conversations that I've had with Kyle, and the low points that I've had the past few months were so not like me, and I just think that should be like a disclaimer with this medication, is that it is like no joke. The one thing I will say that is interesting is it can cause some joint and bone issues, and at the same time is when I really hurt my back again, and I don't know if there's a correlation to that, but it was so bad that I was pretty much immobile for like 2 months. And I already had a herniation. I had an MRI for that, but I think something about the medication might have exacerbated it, or it's just bad timing. I don't know. Up until this point, all of my doctor's appointments were covered by insurance. The blood work, the ultrasounds, my medications, all of that was good to go. And I know that this can be a really expensive process for people, but my insurance does cover rad fertility. So just something to think about when you are going to see a fertility specialist. Also, I do want to note that during this process, Kyle also had to go and get blood work done and give his sample, a semen sample, to get tested, and he was A-okay. Also, during this time, I think I kind of got a little bit more lax with my diet. I was trying to eat mostly, not really keto, but definitely higher fat and protein and lower carb, just to help with the insulin resistance and the inflammation. I got a little bit lax. It was the holidays, and I really was trying to balance my workouts. I was lifting 2 to 3 days a week and doing like 15 to 20 minutes of cardio on those days as like a warm up on the Stairmaster, and then trying to walk anywhere from 30 minutes to like an hour and a half a day. So I was definitely still getting a good bit of movement in, but I have to watch the intensity or I get super inflamed. And it's February 21st is when I had my surgery, and I was in an outpatient facility center, the Delaware Center of Outpatient Surgery, I think is what it was called, for general anesthesia. The night before, you can't have anything to eat or drink after midnight, which is not a problem for me. I'm in bed by 8. Nothing that day as well. Kyle drove me. We had to be there by like 6 o'clock in the morning. You just wear comfy clothes, very loose clothes. I had sweatpants and like a big comfy long sleeve t-shirt. Then you end up, in a gown and stuff. Anyway, when I got there, they'd go through kind of your standard vitals and procedures, signing paperwork and all of that. They walked me back to the OR. They laid me on the table. They were like, we're going to administer the medicine now. And I guess I fell asleep. I was literally on that table for 10 seconds and then I woke up and the surgery was done. So when I woke up from surgery, I think as you would expect someone to be after anesthesia. I was really emotional. I kept crying for Kyle. I wasn't in like too much pain at like initially, and then it started to kick in and I got some pain meds. Kyle came back and I was really out of it. My doctor tried coming and talking to me and telling me like a basic overview of what they found, but it like went in one ear and out the other. And then it was time to go home. I felt like I couldn't move. And so the nurse was like, Kyle's gonna help you get up. He literally had to like lift me up, get me in the wheelchair, wheel me out to the car. I was warned about the gas that would get stuck in your shoulders because they fill you up with gas so that they can see better. And on the ride home, I probably lasted about 5 minutes, and all of a sudden I got very nauseous and I started feeling the gas. It is a super sharp pain, very debilitating. You feel like you can't breathe. I had it in my chest and my shoulders, both shoulders. The worst thing ever, Kyle was gonna stop at the grocery store to pick up a couple things before we got home, and it was like, no, I need you to take me home right now. I need to find relief from this. My doctor also called me on the ride home to tell me my prognosis, which I still we were kind of confused about, and ultimately we're like, we'll just wait till the post-op to make sense of it all. So the next couple of days were really difficult. I had four or 5 sutures, my belly button and like a couple on my sides, and then one like right above my, and like under my stomach, like right where the crease is of like your hip. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't sit up on my own. It felt like I had no strength, no muscle. Like it felt like my insides were gonna fall out when I stood. I think from the anesthesia I would get nauseous. The pain would start when I would stand up again. It was just a horrible couple of days. I was so tired. I was in so much pain, so uncomfortable. It just was not fun. And then like by day 3, it felt like someone was pulling my belly button inward. It was a whole mess. But by day 4, I started to sit up by myself. I had a little bit more of an appetite, could take a couple more laps around the house. The first couple days, Kyle couldn't barely get me to do anything. I was so bad. I don't think I've ever been so reliant on somebody. Like I literally couldn't do anything by myself, which was weird. He was wonderful though. He was like so fantastic.
Oranges and perfect bar and your vitamin D supplement.
been helpful during this whole thing. So if you have this surgery, you definitely need someone there to help you for at least like 3 to 4 days, I would say. It was very, very much appreciated. One thing that really helped me, because a lot of times people will say that you don't have good bowel movements after surgery, which I agree, but you're also not eating a lot, and that contributes to it as well. What I did, I tried to keep it as natural as possible, so I didn't have to take like Dulcolax or anything like that. I did a lot of beef bone broth, some gelatin, and then I was eating really simple foods. I would eat like some grapes or some oranges, a perfect bar, any soup really, and nothing super heavy, at least not until a couple days after surgery. And then I was able to take magnesium citrate to help get things moving. I also was doing some like ginger and turmeric shots for the inflammation and the digestion. So those are all things that really helped me. By like day 5, I was able to take some walks, like legitimate walks, like a 30-minute walk outside. By like a week, I was going back to the gym to go do like a treadmill walk. You can't lift anything more than 15 pounds for 2 weeks. I stupidly did pull-ups after 2 weeks, and like my belly button did not appreciate it. And I have noticed core dysfunction now, and it's something I need to talk to my doctor about, but it literally feels like I don't have core muscles anymore. Like I can't control them. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I think I'm gonna have to do pelvic floor therapy because I feel like I can't explain it, but it just doesn't feel like it did before. Because of how they move things around, just disturb the peace inside of you. I have had some gut issues as well, and like I said, the core dysfunction I've had this past couple of weeks been like really distended, and I think part of that was I was really stressed about some life work things, which I'll get into, but also the core dysfunction and just like my gut microbiome and everything kind of getting back to regular. All right, so prognosis, what did they find? They found early stages of endometriosis, but didn't actually find endometriosis, which at first I was like, what? Like you did all this and I don't have endometriosis? She was like, well, you have fibrotic muscular tissue, which is very similar. It's also hormone based. If you imagine taking something sticky and going like this and having it expand, it's kind of what it looks like, and it was everywhere. They said that they found it all over my spine, my intestines, my colon, my just like the bowels in general. It was pushing my left ovary into my uterus, and it was just a mess in there. And then my peritoneum is apparently shrinking, which is like the layer, I think it's between your organs and your skin. And she said that that was probably contributing to a lot of my pelvic pain. Having the adhesions on my bowels explains a lot about my gut dysbiosis, because bowel adhesions are directly correlated with IBD or irritable bowel disease. And it's something that I really need to be careful with. Probably need to get a colonoscopy just to make sure everything's okay in there. But yeah, I kind of felt it was like I was relieved, but also overwhelmed, because what she found are things that I'm probably going to be dealing with in some capacity for the rest of my life. And I'm going to have to learn how to manage those. They also found a cyst, which they removed, which isn't that big of a deal. And they said that my fallopian tubes were clear. They were a little distended, but they weren't too concerned. So overall, it was good, just kind of a little overwhelming for me thinking about how I was going to recover and move forward and live a life that wasn't consumed by pain and discomfort. So still trying to figure that out. At my post-op appointment, we also discussed moving forward, and this is a little trigger warning. We're going to talk about the fertility stuff here. My doctor basically explained that we were going to try timed intercourse for this first round. So I would be on my Orilissa and Agestin from the time of surgery. So we're going to continue it for another 5 to 6 weeks. So April 1st, technically, I should be done. And then you get your cycle back, hopefully, God willing. And on day 2 of your cycle, I would call Rad Fertility. They would bring me in, do blood work, monitor, and they would give me a prescription of letrozole. Letrozole is typically used as a hormonal chemotherapy in breast cancer, but it also helps with stimulating your follicles to induce ovulation. So previously, fertility clinics would use Clomid. I'm pretty sure a lot still do, but it's either you're gonna get Clomid or you're gonna get letrozole. You would go on the letrozole for, I believe it is 5 days. And each day I'm going into the clinic to get monitored. They want to see how my follicles are stimulating. If they're stimulating, if they're overstimulating. If they're overstimulated, that's when you can run the risk of having 8 children. Like that's how like Octomom happened. So they just want to keep you in like a healthy range. I believe it's like 3 follicles or something like that. Don't quote me. So you do that for 5 days. Then they bring you back in I said that already. So they're monitoring you the whole time, and they're figuring out when you're going to ovulate based upon labs and ultrasounds and other things that they test. They give you an HCG trigger shot, and you take that right before ovulation, and then you have intercourse that day and for the next two to 3 days. You also will start, I'm saying you, but like this is what I'm doing, but you might have the same situation. Progesterone suppositories to make sure that you have healthy levels of progesterone to help prevent a miscarriage. That is a whole cycle. So the hopes are you get pregnant, and then you would stay on the progesterone, I think until 11 weeks, and you'd be very closely monitored and through this time. So with letrozole, you should only take it, I believe you can only do like 3 to 4 cycles, and then they would move you to either IUI or it might actually go straight to IVF. So the only difference with the IUI is that Kyle would be giving his sample, we would be going to the clinic together, and they would be doing insemination for us to just prevent any, it'd be like directly into the canal that it needs to be in without having to worry about it actually getting there. And that's kind of the whole point of IUI. So we're going to start with just timed intercourse, probably do 2 cycles, and then if there's no success, we'd go to IUI and then IVF if we needed to, but I'm really praying that that is not our story. So that is the whole thing. Now, the fertility plan moving forward, because it's not a diagnostic thing anymore, it is considered trying to conceive. Insurance does not cover it. So we are paying out of pocket for this. I don't know if it's kind of the same across the board, but one cycle for us, I think, is going to run about $1,300 when all the medication is included. And that includes all the doctor's visits throughout those cycles. We were kind of freaking out about the money, but we had like a total God moment, miracle happen where like the day after we found out what we were going to be spending on this, we got blessed with literally to the dot, like what we needed financially to make this happen. And cry because it does make me really emotional, but it was just like the most amazing blessing. And we keep having these just incredible experiences happen, and we're just really trusting that God has his I know he has his hand on this, just praying that, man, his plan does include us having our own children. Sorry about that. Kyle was finishing up a 15-hour shift and coming home, and I told him I'd make him breakfast, so I had to take a pause. But let's see, where were we? Also, because there's not certainty in it. It's not like you pay this and you're 100% going to get pregnant. So it was overwhelming, but God really has provided for us. And we only have, it's March 21st. April 1st, I am off of my medication, which is really exciting. And we get to kind of go into these cycles. With that, now that you have the backstory, I want to answer some of the questions that you sent me on Instagram. And I think the questions will kind of help paint a better picture of the story as well. So one of the first questions is how to support friends going through this. So this is just a really good rule of thumb from someone who has been dealing with something chronically, not just the last couple months of finding out about like the endo and the fibrosis, or fertility issues. If someone's going through fertility issues or a chronic illness or a chronic injury or something that is very debilitating and causes mental stress, physical disability and stress, affects your social life, affects your work life, affects your relationships, really difficult. And one of the best things that, back up here, this is just making me seem like I have all these issues, but in my senior year of high school when I had chronic insomnia, which honestly, I think from a hormonal standpoint, that time in my life, I think has kind of evolved, and had I not gone through that, I think some of my hormonal issues might have not been as bad, but I don't know. It's just kind of a theory that I have. When I was going through the chronic insomnia and I was in therapy and behavioral therapy, and because I had really intense anxiety from an abusive relationship in high school and some stress around my family that just resulted in extreme anxiety, which then resulted in me not sleeping. And when you don't sleep, it's the most important thing physiologically for you. When you don't sleep over a period of time, what that does to your brain and how you think, how you act, just everything changes. I was so irritable. I was so I just wasn't myself at all. I was literally a zombie because of the medication that I was on and stuff. So I just remember my mom saying, you know, doesn't matter what you're going through, I am going to love you through it. And she knew not to take things personally. She knew that I was going to get through it, and this was just a phase, not a phase, but this was a chapter that we were going through, and there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's really important to recognize that you don't make the other person feel invalidated, especially when it's something like endometriosis or chronic pain, where it's kind of a weird thing. It's hard to understand, it's hard to articulate. It can be minimized very easily by others when they don't have it or they don't understand it. And so it's very isolating, and it makes you feel like you're faking it or something, and you don't want to share it because you're always having a problem. And it does cause you to kind of become a little bit more reclusive, and I totally relate to that. And so I think when it comes to a chronic issue or fertility, the best way that you can help someone through that is to, number one, validate how they feel. And sometimes you don't want advice, and that's something that I have really become kind of sensitive about, and I try to not get defensive, or I try to take it because I know people love me and they want to help, but sometimes you don't want anyone telling you what to do. Or like, well, have you tried this? Have you done it? Like, sometimes it's helpful, but sometimes you're just like, like, stop. Like, I don't want to, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what you think I should do. Like, let me just be. And I think that has really helped me, just having people who are like, hey, I'm gonna ride this out with you. I'm here if you want to talk. I understand you. I support you. But they're not like constantly bombarding you with ideas or things, or being like, well, it could always be worse. Like, I hate that, you know? I understand it could be worse, but when you're going through your own thing, it's like you just want people to be on the same page with you. And I think fertility, it's a little different, and I truthfully don't know if I'm the right person to give advice on this, because I don't feel like we have really struggled with fertility the way that some people have. You know, we tried for 9 months, and then we went right to a fertility specialist. And I know there's other people's journeys with fertility that are a lot more intense and emotional than ours. So I want to be aware of that and sensitive to that, where you're like, I'm here for you if you want to talk, and know that I'm like, I love you and I'm praying for you, and that I'm here emotionally and thinking about you, even if you don't want to talk or you want space. Because I think a lot of people end up wanting space. I don't know if that answered the question right, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. How much is it to use a fertility clinic? So Rad Fertility, everything was covered. I know I mentioned this already, but Rad Fertility, everything was covered up until the trying to conceive part. I don't know if that's like across the board, but I always kind of thought going to fertility clinic immediately was out of pocket. So the fact that all of this stuff was covered was amazing. Actually, I don't know if I should share this, but I think it is kind of helpful to know. These are my papers from our insurance. My surgery was about $16,000, and it was covered. So that is a huge, huge blessing. And I know there are people who pay out of pocket for this surgery. And some of this the endometriosis support groups I follow on Facebook, they talk about like being on these wait lists for these surgeries for months and months and months. And I feel like if you go to a fertility specialist and not your OB, you're gonna have a much different outcome. So I highly encourage you to do that. Also, I'll link the Facebook groups that I am a part of. They're super helpful. They recommend specialists and just lifestyle things and all of the things. It's really helpful. And that's another way to not feel alone, is to talk to people who are going through what you're going through. What are you doing different with nutrition and fitness? Okay, so right now I have a whole slew of vitamins that I'm back on, including a pretty good prenatal, which I'll probably do a whole separate video on that. And I've been posting over on Instagram. So as far as nutrition and fitness go, I have been posting a lot of like what I eat in a days over on Instagram, showing you my supplements and some of my just like wellness tips. So definitely check that out if you are interested, but I am trying to do a little bit more lower carb right now to kind of kickstart my my body into, not kickstart, but like help with my insulin resistance. I'm taking ovasitol, which is my own inositol, and D-chiroinositol, which helps with blood sugar regulation. Chasteberry or Vitex helps with progesterone. I'm doing L-glutamine in my water, which you do have to stop when you get pregnant. Same with berberine. I'm taking that before meals for blood sugar. I'm on prescription strength vitamin D, which I forgot to mention. Vitamin D, not only is it needed when you're taking like Orlissa and the Agestin because it has like that bone and joint deficiency associated with it, but I had low vitamin D, which is so important. Vitamin D, I talk about this all the time. It should be treated like a hormone. It's so important. So I'm on prescription strength vitamin D. I think it's like 50,000 units or whatever. And then I take that once a week, but then every day I take another 5,000. So I'm loading up on the vitamin D. And then for workouts, I'm doing a lot of walking, a lot of 3:30, so 12 incline, 3 speed, brain fart, 3 speed, 30 minutes. And I kind of do a variation of that. Like I'll go up higher on incline, change up the speed. I'll walk backwards to help with knee pain and stuff like that, and knee strength. I lift like 3 to 4 days a week, but I just have to watch the intensity so that I don't get super inflamed. But yeah, I walk a lot. How is your recovery going? I think overall it's pretty good. I'm trying to figure out like the whole core, pelvic floor stuff and get that back. And I just feel a little bit different. My digestion's not back to normal yet. And I just feel a little different on the inside. That's the only way I can explain it. How are you doing actually? I love when people ask that because it's like I have the tendency of when someone's like, oh, how are you? I'm like, I'm fine, even though I'm having like an emotional breakdown. And I'm going to get into this in another question, but I was really struggling with just the balance of everything. So my husband works a completely different shift than I do. So I commute 2 hours a day, one way there, one way back. Kyle works a lot of night shift. He has a lot of overtime. He's like all over the county. So it can be a little unpredictable sometimes. It just adds a lot of stress. Oh, the lighting just got terrible. It adds a lot of stress to our routine because we don't see each other hardly at all. We don't even cross paths some days, most days, until he has his 4-day weekend, which is every 2 weeks. And that really takes a toll on your marriage. It's difficult for the dogs. It's difficult for taking care of the house and just that sort of thing. And so when you couple that with me not being well, me being really emotionally kind of unstable, having to commute, being really uncomfortable at my job because of my back situation. Like I can only sit for like 10 to 15 minutes at a time and then I have to go stretch and lay down. So I was starting to feel really overwhelmed. I was feeling very overwhelmed at the thought that I have to be going to the chiropractor, physical therapy, pelvic floor therapy, and then the fertility center almost every day. Well, so those other things are like a couple times a week. The fertility center for stretches of time will be like every day. I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this with like your schedule and my work schedule. And it was just really overwhelming. And I've just been having a really hard time. And to be completely honest, like my mental health has not been very good and I cry a lot. And I've not been good. That is the God's honest truth. And I think that's why I've had a hard time showing up on social too, because I'm just in this weird spot where I'm also like trying to figure out what my content should be right now, because I feel like this is so consuming and I don't want to be that person that comes online and is like a downer and always having a problem, because I already feel that way in my life, like my real life. And I don't know if I want that to be my identity online as like the girl with problems who's trying to fix them. And like, obviously I'm sharing it now. I want to be some sort of guide or informational thing for people going through this, but it's not like, I don't want that to be my full thing. So I'm trying to figure that out right now. So bear with me if my content seems a little all over the place, but we're working through it. But yeah, I'm having a hard time answering how am I actually doing, because I truthfully was not doing very well. And I think it's hard to admit that sometimes. If you are in my personal life, you know that most of my conversations recently result in me crying. So that kind of gives it away. Okay, so this next question kind of pertains to that last one, but how is your work-life balance? So like I said, it really wasn't, and it was causing a lot of issues because of our schedules and me not feeling well. And I really like my job, my corporate job. I'm someone who takes the opinions of others in like a work setting very serious. Like I'm definitely someone who has to do really well. And so the thought of not being able to do my best because I was in the office being really uncomfortable and like in pain and thinking about how I'm going to get to these doctor's appointments and who's letting the dogs out because I won't be home till later and Kyle's not going to be home. Like, it was just always a thing. And then, you know, Kyle would get off of work and I would be having to still go in the next few days, or so we were never lining up, and it was really tough. And I don't know how much of this I should share now, but this could be helpful for you as well if you're going through this. There are programs in place for individuals going through or needing some sort of an accommodation. So I'm working with my company to accommodate this right now, where I can work from home, and I'm really grateful for that. That literally came into effect this week. So yeah, I'm very grateful for that, because I know it's going to help. It's going to allow me to do my job, get to my appointments, and have that just a little less stress within my weeks, which I'm grateful for. Again, it's the tears. They just happen now. Are you going to be coming back to social media full time? What are your plans with that? I miss your videos. Thank you. I know I kind of touched on this already, but I really love making YouTube videos. I love making content in general, and it has been really hard for me the past couple years to be consistent because of all of these things happening. And I'm trying to figure it out, and maybe we can figure it out together. Like, what do you guys want to see? I love doing the planning and the organization videos, and I think I can still make that work. I think what it's coming down to is this holistic way of living that affects how you take care of your home, the products that you use in your home, how you feed yourself, how you move your body, and all of these things coincide together. And I think that is where kind of finding my space. Maybe it does involve a little bit more of like that healing type of content, because that's what I'm going through right now. But there's got to be this happy medium of like wellness content and home content and sharing what's going on in my life. And that's where I think I need to fall, and I need to just go for it and stop like holding myself back. But it has been difficult too, because I do have a full-time job and all the stuff going on. Like, the last thing I'm thinking about is like filming. So, and I've been uncomfortable to film too. And it's difficult too when you take time off. You feel so disconnected, and I feel like my audience has kind of diminished a little bit, and my community's diminished, and I want to grow that back. And I think honestly some of the best ways to do that are on Instagram too. And so I know I've mentioned it a few times, but if you want to check that out, follow me over there. I talk a lot more over there, and we can chat. So that would be super fun. This video is getting super long. I'm gonna have quite the time editing it, but I just wanted to give you guys an overview of exactly what is going on, how we've been navigating it, and all of the things. So I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I am an open book at this point. I will pretty much share everything, but I hope you guys are doing well. I'm excited for this next season. I am truly praying that this is going to be a huge blessing this next season, like these next few months. As difficult as they are, you guys. How many times have I started crying in this video? I'm just praying that this is like a great season for us all. And you know, when we go through things together, it also just really helps. So I appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch this, and I will see you in the next video.